Hello, I'm Kit Bradshaw. Tonight, Sir Keir Starmer pushes ahead with benefit cuts despite warnings of the biggest Labour rebellion of his premiership. Meanwhile, more money for the military to get Britain battle ready. But what will it mean here in the south? And this Pride Month, are relations between the LGBT community and their politicians at their lowest point for years? Well, joining me here in Westminster to discuss all that, Labour MP Anneliese Dodds, who's represented Oxford East since 2017 and who, until February, was the International Development Minister before quitting over cuts to overseas aid. For the Conservatives, Penny Mordaunt. Now, Dame Penny Mordaunt, the former MP for Portsmouth North, a seat she held for 14 years until last July. No stranger to the Cabinet either, as the former International Development Secretary, Defence Secretary and Leader of the Commons. And for the Liberal Democrats, James MacCleary, MP for Lewes, winning that seat last year with a majority of almost 13,000. A warm welcome to The Last Word to you all. Now, there's growing Labour rebellion to the government's plans to cut benefits. Its flagship welfare reform bill was published yesterday and includes tightening the criteria for personal independence payments, known as PIP, and changes to the incapacity and sickness parts of the universal credit system. But Labour rebels held a rally outside Parliament earlier this week with Poole MP Neil Duncan-Jordan among them. He's one of 150 on the Labour benches thought to have reservations about the plans, which could see an estimated 800,000 people lose their benefits. Kate Annetts from Brighton is employed but also receives PIP because of her disability. She fears she'll see her payments cut.
I think a lot of disabled people voted for Labour because they wanted there to be a change. And it seemed that Labour were going to be the people to do that. Disabled people feel victimised by these proposed cuts. And a lot of disabled people who voted for Labour now regret that because it's not what they voted for.
And Kate also told us she fears she might have to move house if she loses her PIP. Anneliese Dodds, taking benefits from a working person like Kate, is that what you went into politics to do?
Well, actually, I'd really urge people to look at the details of what the government is setting out. Now, the bill was only published yesterday. I'm still working my way through it, so I'm still looking at the precise details of it. But actually, there are many things in that bill that many disabled people have been calling for a very long time. You know, at the moment we have a situation where someone could have a very serious condition, they're never going to be able to work again in their lives, and yet they keep being reassessed for their eligibility. That needs to end. We've also got, of course, the basic element of universal credit, which hasn't increased beyond inflation in a sustained way for many years. People aren't able to try out work at the moment with the current system because they fear that they would lose all of the support that they receive. It's too much of a risk. So these are big problems that need to be fixed, and the bill will fix those problems. There are really big changes in there that are focused on those issues, but there are changes to eligibility that are in there. I'm looking at them really carefully. I think we have to be really honest and open about this discussion. And, you know, obviously I did listen very carefully to what Kate said there, the person that you just interviewed. We have got a challenge in our country. We're going to see if current trends
What do you say to people like Kate who are very fearful? I'm sure there's many in your constituency who are fearful about losing their benefits.
So I've had a lot of discussions with people who are concerned around that. Under the government's plans, actually it would be around 1 in 10 people who would be claiming PIP who would lose eligibility under the plan. So the vast majority of people would continue to have eligibility. I am looking very closely at the plans. As I say, I haven't managed to get entirely through the bill, but the current situation is one, I think the government's right to say this, that's not sustainable. If we continue on current trends, we'll see a doubling in the number of people who are claiming PIP by the end of the decade. 1,000 more people are claiming PIP every day. We need to be dealing with this. We need to be helping people into work, and we need to be treating people better who will never be able to work. I think the government's right on that.
Penny Mordaunt, the broad brush of this policy, is that something the Tories would support, cutting the benefits bill?
We have to reduce the amount of money that we're spending on benefits in total, but I'd say two things. I mean, first of all, this shows the importance of having detailed manifestos. So we had set out how we would cut the welfare bill, 12 billion of cuts that we had in that. People could have a look in detail at what we were proposing and make a decision on it. Labour did not have any plans in their manifesto around this issue at all. And that's bad for two reasons. A, it doesn't tell the public what you're going to do, but also they're now in trouble with their MPs. Had all their MPs stood on that platform, they would find it easier to persuade them to go through the lobbies. But on the substance of this, I think one of the irritating things for people who are engaged with this, these different benefits, is that everyone gets lumped in and talked about as if they're one particular personality. And of course, there are many people facing many different situations within this. Some people who cannot work but want to do meaningful activity. Others that need help getting back into work having had an injury. And so when you approach these issues purely about saving money, you end up making bad decisions and causing anxiety.
And actually, the Work and Pension Secretary, when she initially set out these proposals before the bill was published yesterday, did start by talking about the finances. And James MacCleary, your party and the Lib Dems, they want to spend a lot more money on things like social care. So I'm guessing you would welcome saving money from other areas like work and pensions.
Well, no, I mean, when you look at the PIP in particular, we're looking at some of the most vulnerable people in society. And one of the ostensible reasons the government's given for this is to get people back into work. We think it's the wrong emphasis. We think social care is actually where you start with this. We have people who are waiting for appointments, people who are stuck in the health system who can't get out because we don't have a social care system that allows people to get the treatment they need. And what we've been saying is, look, if you actually want to get people back into work, that is where the emphasis should lie. And you know, what Kate was talking about there, I mean, Brighton's obviously very close to where I live, and I have constituents in touch all the time about it. And one of the fundamental things, we can get into the detail of the policy, but there's real fear out there. People are frightened. These are very vulnerable people. And they see a government that, and Kate talked about it there, a government that's elected with a feeling that they would stand up for them, and instead they seem to be picking on them.
And that fear was something raised by the Liberal Democrats with the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, who was standing in for Sir Keir Starmer yesterday.
I know how some people are fearful of the changes, but this Labour government put its values into place and will ensure that people are supported into it where they can, and where they can't, they are supported. We are the party of the welfare state, Mr Speaker. We set it up back after the Second World War, and we believe it should be there for people who need it, but we should also help people into work.
Anneliese Dodds, there's talk of anything between 50 and 150 potential Labour rebels. How much unhappiness is there on the Labour benches about this policy?
I think it's far more a question of Labour MPs wanting to make sure they're doing the right thing by their constituents. And I have to say, as part of this discussion, we haven't heard, with respect to the others on this programme, any plan from them about how to support people into work. We've got at the moment 1 in 8 young people not working. Now, I think that is a huge problem. It's a huge problem for those young people in the future, for their life chances. Labour set out how we'll support those people. The extra support that's going in there is going to be really critical. We've also released plans.
Why is the government then facing this rebellion? Is it just an error in the communication, as we've heard so much over the past year, that they've got the comms wrong, or is it actually the policy as well, do you think?
It's not. It's because people are looking really carefully at this. As I said that I am, there are many elements which command support, changes that should have been made many, many years ago. I mean, we should not have had, under previous governments, people who were severely unwell being subject to those
briefly,
reassessments.
Penny Mordaunt, come back
we're
at the accusation that you didn't have
many
a plan.
other
So first
changes
of all,
we're making.
we did, unlike Labour, we did have a detailed plan on welfare reform, costed.
You
There was
had 14
nothing.
years.
No, there was nothing in Labour's manifesto on that. But actually, we brought in some of the most fundamental changes to the welfare system. We saw all these benefits that we inherited from the Labour Party, which were crazy, amalgamated them into universal credit. Had we not done those reforms, I really do not know how we would have got through the pandemic.
But you allowed the benefits bill to rise very sharply during COVID, and that's part of the problem that the new Labour government's facing.
We made, in the approach before the pandemic, we were reducing the welfare bill by about 12 billion, just to put it in context to Labour's figures of 5 or 6. And also in that, giving more support to particular people who had not been benefiting, people suffering from certain mental health conditions, for example. So that's the level of approach that we need. But you've got to do it in a way that is incremental, strong transitional arrangements, which is why we did it over many, many years.
Very briefly, James MacCleary, your party's saying they'll vote against this in the Commons in the next couple of weeks.
Well, it's unfair, and it's picking on the wrong target for us. Look, we're not here just to bash Labour government. They've inherited 14 years of the Conservatives trashing public services and are in a very difficult position. There are difficult choices that need to be made. We just feel in this instance, it's the wrong decision.
And while the welfare purse strings tighten, ministers are keen to get the chequebook out when it comes to defence. That seems more pressing than ever in the week that the situation in the Middle East became critical, with RAF jets sent to the region. The Prime Minister met President Trump and other world leaders at the G7 in Canada. Top of the agenda was addressing the worsening situation between Israel and Iran, as well as the ongoing war in Ukraine. For years now, the United States has been calling on NATO allies to pay their way for defence. Because since the 1950s, the amount the UK spends on the military as a share of our economy has been going down and down and down as successive governments prioritised other areas such as health and social care. Currently stands at 2% of gross domestic product, or GDP. The Chancellor says she'll increase it to 2.6% in the next 2 years. Part of that extra spending will go to regenerating Portsmouth Naval Base, with more ship berths and jetties being built and replacing the ageing buildings there. All part of Rachel Reeves's plan to make the country a defence industrial superpower. We asked people in Salisbury, close to the Army's largest training area, what they thought of the rise in defence spending.
Generally, threats have gone up, especially with the US stepping back. NATO, or what remains of it, has to be defended.
We need to protect ourselves, but yes, we do need to think about people that haven't got enough money to live.
I think we have to be a bit careful about not having any defence at all. So yes, I think they've managed to cut it down a bit too far and needs going back up.
We've just gone back and think somebody else is going to help us out, but they won't.
Dame Penny Mordaunt, the post-Cold War peace settlement seems shattered. Is the rise that the Chancellor announced in military spending enough, in your view?
It's not a rise. I mean, the first thing I'd say is that you have got to invest in defence. You want to look after the NHS, you want to grow the economy. If you don't have your shipping lanes open and the NHS is under a cyber attack, you're stuffed. So you have to invest in these capabilities. The problem is that normally you have a spending review, and then usually the day after you have a defence review or a security review announced. This was done the other way around. So you had all the fanfare and commitment to saying we've got to defend the realm, and then the following week Labour declined to fund it.
That's not true.
It is. So let me give you the figures. So NATO, this is a NATO first defence review. NATO says if you can't save any more money on efficiencies, that all contributing nations need to be spending 3.7% in the next Parliament. We're stuck at 2.6. The uplift is for the intelligence agencies, which doesn't count towards your NATO
so you're saying
expenditure.
It's not going to the conventional forces.
The Chagos Islands,
Penny's wrong
add
on
in
this.
the
Let Anneliese
$6
Dodds
billion
come
of
back.
efficiency savings. The budget's actually going down.
No,
It's
Penny,
smoke and mirrors.
come back to that. Come back to that.
So you're simply wrong on that, Penny.
I'm not, Anneliese, you know it.
I know that you are wrong, because we're talking about an £11 billion increase in real terms during that spending review period.
You're not.
I don't think
You're
it's a
not doing
bad
it.
thing that the Labour government commissioned a strategic defence review as soon as we came into government. We did that because we were concerned about not having the right defences, which had been run down
And the
under
defence
previous
review is
governments.
great.
And
Lord
that's why we
Robertson-
did that
Okay,
review.
okay, let me just
Penny's
put-
criticising it. It's strange.
Lord Robertson is a Labour politician.
Okay.
I have publicly supported him. He's done a good job. He brought in Conservatives. He brought in all sorts of people.
But
It's
you just
not
said
a
we shouldn't
political
have done
review.
it. You just said we shouldn't
Okay.
have done
No,
it in that
Anneliese,
timing.
the review is great. The problem is you're not funding it.
Okay.
And we need to fund it. This is the most serious, sorry,
So
Kit,
we're just
but
we're
it is the
disputing
most serious issue facing
disputes
this nation.
Certainly
over
is,
the
very
stats.
serious.
But Anneliese Dodds, when you resigned from government, that was over a point of principle, over the cuts to international aid. The government have justified some of those cuts to international aid to spend on defence. There's obviously dispute over whether it'll be enough, but do you think they've been proved right by what we've seen in the Middle East over recent weeks?
Well, we do need to spend more on defence. And although I was critical of some of the means that the government has used to get there, I'm afraid I completely disagree with Penny, and the figures bear that out very, very clearly. I think my concern is that we will need to go further in the future. Now, the UK is under Labour a very major contributor to NATO. We're the third biggest. I think that's recognised actually by the other NATO countries. I think, however, given the nature of the threat we face, we're not going to be able to get out of that through cuts. We'll have to invest more in the future.
James MacCleary, do you hope that your constituency will benefit from some of these, whether you agree on the figures between these two, whether the increase, if there is one, to the defence spending?
We do. We have supported the increase to 2.5%, and indeed our disappointment was that the government rejected our suggestion of cross-party talks to work out how we get to 3%. It is undoubtedly necessary, as somebody who has taken part in lots of discussions on the threat that Russia poses to the West at the moment. Across Eastern Europe, in the Baltic states, in the Balkans, they're a destabilising force. The asymmetrical warfare that they are currently waging, and of course the campaign that they're waging in Ukraine, require our support. I do believe that the cuts to international aid to fund it are pretty indefensible, and they are short-sighted and will actually cause more destabilisation in the future, ending up costing us a lot more money in the long term. So the means to do it, I couldn't disagree with more. However, I do think that it's the right direction, and Liberal Democrats support that and want to work with the government to achieve it.
And it's a debate that will go on, because defence isn't the only area ministers are prioritising. Infrastructure projects were given more investment, with a 10-year infrastructure strategy published just today. And many projects in our region are set to benefit. An additional £590 million of public money going to the long-delayed Lower Thames crossing linking Kent and Essex, and £2.5 billion extra given to the East-West rail line between East Anglia and Oxfordshire. The first commercial freight train, you can see it there, travelled along part of the new line on Monday. Neither of those projects in your constituency, James MacCleary. What's at the top of your infrastructure shopping list?
Well, after this spending review, anything at all would have been top of my spending list. I mean, we got nothing at all. The South East was completely excluded from spending review, and it was made. The Chancellor said it in as many words that we're not going to be spending money in the South East during this spending review period, and that means that for my constituents, where we have roads that are just as congested as anybody else, we have huge burden on our railways. We saw very little investment. So I have quite a long shopping list, but the Chancellor...
Let Anneliese come back there about the idea that the South was left behind in the spending review.
Yeah, I'm afraid that's just nonsense. I mean, look at the really big announcements that were made by the Chancellor.
In Sussex.
Investment in... Yes, I think quite a few people in Sussex are concerned about the cost of housing. Perhaps you don't pick that up from your constituents, but
Sussex.
That's certainly something that is raised with me repeatedly in my city. I know it's a huge
about
issue
specific projects.
Yeah, that huge backing for affordable housing, the biggest in a generation, is really significant. Well, they're pretty specific for the people who are going to be getting
UK-wide projects. I didn't say I didn't support those, but they're not specific to the South East.
I think it's really important, actually, when that's such a core issue, because housing's so expensive in our region. Having that once-in-a-generation investment is going to make a big difference.
But they're not specific to our area, so that was correct what I said.
I think housing will be one of the defining issues, actually, of this Parliament.
I agree.
If you get anywhere near building as many homes as Labour wants to. Finally tonight, June is Pride Month, with thousands of people taking part in protests, parades and parties here in the South. But are relations between the LGBT community and politicians in this country at their lowest ebb for years? The organisers of Brighton Pride have banned political parties from attending, with events in Oxford, Newbury and Canterbury following suit. They say it's in solidarity with the transgender community after the Supreme Court ruling on the definition of a woman. Meanwhile, rainbow flags have been banned from Kent County Council buildings by the new Reform UK administration there. Only the Union flag, the flag of St George and the flag of Kent will now be flown. Penny Mordaunt, what do you make of the state of relations between the LGBT community and politicians?
Well, I'm sorry to sort of hear that people are feeling about this. I've not been in Parliament for the last year when some of these decisions have been taken, but I think politicians from all parties are trying to grapple with some difficult issues and trying to give people certainty about them. And there have been obviously landmark cases in the Supreme Court. I think the public as a whole are very pragmatic about these issues and the approach to which toilet you can use and all of these things. They want people to go about and live their lives, and people just want to know what the rules are. And I think that's how the bulk of people feel. So where you've
been criticised just on that one of changing your view. You said in the House of Commons many years ago that a trans woman was a woman, and you've changed your view on that.
No, I haven't. It's always been the case that a biological woman is not the same as a trans woman. But you have to recognise you need to give people certainty about what's expected. And in the Lewes case, you've got a historic old pub that's got, 2 loos, they can't build another one. You need to tell people what it is they need to be doing. So they want clarity and certainty on that. And we need to recognise there are other parts of the state, our national insurance records, our passports, all those things. People need to know what's expected.
Anneliese Dodds, it's felt like progress was moving in one direction. We had marriage equality. Does it feel like things are going back?
Well, actually, I think we're recording this programme on quite an important day, because yesterday we saw a really big step forward. I was really pleased about it as a former Women and Equalities Minister as well as Minister for International Development, because until now, if someone's beaten up by a thug who shouts racist abuse at them or abuse of their religion, that's treated as an aggravated offence. If they do that at someone who is disabled, someone who is gay or lesbian or trans, and while they're shouting that abuse, there's actually no aggravated offence applied. Well, yesterday the government confirmed it's going to level the playing field, and I think that's a really big step forward.
That's a win for relations, potentially. James MacCleary, very quickly. Reform UK say that nobody is excluded, everyone is included in their LGBT flag ban. What do you make of your counterparts over the border in Kent?
It's marginal nonsense. At the end of the day, I've run a council. The last thing on earth you need is people faffing around with flags. I mean, up in Durham, they've also taken down the Ukrainian flag. We need to be sending signals that we include everybody, and you do that by just showing those gestures are important. I just think these are marginal issues they are using in Kent to distract from the fact, for instance, they have abolished lots of committee meetings and they are not doing the job of running Kent effectively, which is what people on the ground there actually want, not people fiddling around with different flags.
OK, I'm sure that is a debate that will go on and on, especially with the local elections next year in other parts of the south. But that's it for this month's Last Word. We'll be back on the 10th of July for our final programme before Parliament's summer break. But for now, thank you to my panel, Labour's Anneliese Dodds, the Conservatives' Dame Penny Mordaunt, and from the Liberal Democrats, James MacCleary. And thank you to you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.